Liege Games here. Let me tell you right now why Libertalia, the new edition, may be in a lot of people's top 10 games of the year lists at the end of the year. Already willing to throw that out there in terms of things you should know and why it should be on your radar, even if it wasn't like me in the first place. Let's do this. Look, I'll flat out say it. I am not a huge Stonemaier games fan. I'm not. I do not own any other Stonemaier games. I do not enjoy the majority of the games that they have put out until this point. And again, it's my own personal taste. Nothing against them. I think they put out a very solid product. But oftentimes, the Venn diagram of them and me has been sort of more like double zeros on a scoreboard. And so when I saw Libertalia getting a reprint, I've never played the original. I have no affiliation with the original. A lot of people are going to make this video and they're going to say, Chris, how do you compare this to the original? And I go, no, don't. Consider this a separate game. Because you're always going to have the purists that like the original. You're always going to have the early adopters that are going to prefer the new one. I have, gotten in sooner. And why is this game of note? Where does this get separated from the other Stonemaier games? This gives you asymmetric, pirate, anthropomorphic fun at up to a 5-player count that I dare say is best at the 3, 4, and 5 player counts that doesn't drastically increase the overhead or the time. And that is what makes this game great. So you may be asking yourself then, what is this dynamic that you're speaking of, Chris? Because, you compare it to Coup, you compare it to Oriflamme, you compare it to those games where you're going to be manipulating things around and managing currencies and managing victory points and just having some interaction. What does that look like, though? Well, in this game, essentially what you're doing is you have your standard deck of 40 cards. Everyone has the same 40 cards. Each round, you choose 6 of these cards, and everyone then has the same 6 that are in their hand. Then comes the meta. What order do I play them in? How are they going to interact with each other? What happens when they're all strewn out in terms of placement on the island? That's also where the initiative in the corner comes in, because they get arranged in that order. Lowest initiative goes first. However, then comes the real fun part. If you're trying to go first, it's going to be great, but the dynamic again shifts at the end of said round, because you then snake draft, essentially, if you're familiar with that, first to last, last to first, but the last to first gets those bonus tiles that are associated each time as well. Some of these characters will go into your graveyard. Some of them will stay around to help you score points later, depending on what's at the bottom. And that depends on when they act and when the interactions happen. Then you have the symbols on the bottom of the cards, and that tells you when the effect actually goes or when it's scored. And some of them have just one, some of them have multiple, some of them only go in the bottom. And so that is the other dynamic that is constantly changing, because you're going to know what everyone has, but how psyched out are you going to try and make them? Now you can see that these cards not only manipulate the time of the round that they score, they manipulate the crew that you are going to end up with either in your final possession for scoring purposes or even discarded altogether, and they manipulate the starburst loots that are going to be collected in said snake draft in the first place. So what's more important to you? Because again, it goes into a combo system with the loot that you need to be aware of, again, adding another layer upon layer in the dynamics, while still having it relatively contained, because you're only dealing with 6 of these every single time. Rinse, repeat, enjoy. Now, again, I covered one of the issues right there very briefly that a lot of people are poo-pooing and nitpicking and just piecemealing criticisms at this game for. Oh, the anthropomorphic animal pirate things. Seriously? With all of the anime, cleavage, and other grotesque stuff out there, you're drawing the animals, you're drawing the lines, I'm leaving that in there, at well done, exceptionally quality art with animals as people? That's the line that you're going to draw it at? Come on, seriously. No, come on. When we talk about the other comparisons, the reskins, the re-editions, the re-themes of games like this that have achieved something along those lines, somehow having a giant grotesque overwhelming god creature with literally tentacles on his chin as whiskers, or things that look like phallic interpretations of people's dreams are okay and mainstream, but this is where you draw the criticism at. And I'm looking at you, BSG, Battlestar Galactica versus Unfathomable. I'm including that in the comparisons. I mean, they could have done anything, and they went with Cthulhu. So, if this is the hill you're dying on, folks, get off this hill. There's better places to be. Now, the other criticism that I sort of did not elaborate on, but you may have heard me say there, that it's best at 3, 4, and 5. Well, that's because all of the people are poo-pooing at 2, because 2 requires basically a dummy player in the middle of the board and how it interacts. And I agree with that. It's not as good. But I'll make the argument that if you're okay with trying to play this solo, and, you know, solo or even 2-player, it works well enough that you'll get a very good gist of the game. You won't have quite the dynamic interactions that the 3, 4, and 5 will do, because, I mean, that is the chaotic goodness, akin to other games with an evolving meta and a who's going to do what when, that use these similar mechanisms of either numbered cards that you're matching or symmetrical hands that you are choosing the order of doing in how you interact and play on the board. And I'm looking at games akin to Oriflamme or Coup or things along those lines, where everybody knows what everyone potentially has, but it's how you use that and how you game the gamer. You game the system that is the ecstatic, dynamic event that makes it as good as it is. Because the revolutionary thing in this is not the actual mechanics. It's not the board. It's not the loot tokens. It's not the abilities of these character decks themselves. It's not the quality of the insert, which is second to hardly anybody. It's the emotions that it creates, and that is what it captures and keeps from the original Libertalia. Again, not having played it, but now having experienced this, have no doubts about saying that. And going back to that 5-player count, right? I just mentioned this the other week with Ra, my review of Ra, where that game stands on its own 2 feet at anywhere from 2 to 5, and probably better than this. But especially at 4 and 5, especially at 5, right? You always hear the request. Number one request I see often online is, hey guys, I'm looking for something at a higher player count that's not a party game. That's not a social deduction game, right? Bing, 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 Libertalia. Bing, 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 Ra. That is also why it fits a niche. It fits an emptiness in a lot of people's collections in that sense, or has the ability to do so at that player count. That is not one of those other 2 things of social deduction, party. Because there's times you're okay with playing those. There's times you have a number that you don't want to play something like that with. I mean, 5 is almost too little for a party game. Almost too little for a social deduction game. You want 6 to 8. Secret Hitler, 6 to 8. Shadows over Camelot, you want 6 to 8. You know, the 5 is that dangerously difficult sweet spot to sometimes fill, and both of these games that I've mentioned, and especially this one, fill it very nicely without making you feel like game night is dragging with a 5-player game, because that's the other aspect of a lot of games that have a 5th player element, or allow for an expansion with a 5th player element to become a knockdown, drag out, teeth pulling, nail clenching bore. And this isn't that. Not that at all. And again, I went into this, Libertalia, Stonemaier's offering it, so I might as well take him up on it and see if it's halfway decent. No, it's totally great. It's freaking fantastic. The tension of cards and little cubes that look more like starbursts cannot be understated. And again, only over, a couple rounds. It's quick. It's easy to learn. And again, the biggest take-home point is you'll be able to have it hit the table without any difficulty. You can teach this game to anybody. And to be fair, it's more family-friendly. If you want to go back to the first point, it's more family-friendly than the original Libertalia was, with more of a Dead Man Tell No Tales. I know it's a separate game altogether. Dead Man Tell No Tales, or even Dark Pirates of the Caribbean sort of vibe, in not a positive as such light. I know, again, it wasn't anything, horrible, but if you're a family looking at this game and you have the Dark Pirate version or you have the cutesy light animal version, which do you think you're going to pick up? And that is the true test, right? Stonemaier essentially has said, look, we know where the market is. The market is not with people like me. The market is, I mean, that's why Wingspan is well over 1 million. Not because of people like me and you buying it, but because people outside of the norm are getting interested and seeing it and being attracted to it aesthetically, but also enjoying the step up in the gameplay. And this does both as well. And that's why they are so successful, because they are able to harness and utilize that in their products to the best of almost anyone in the hobby in the first place. So there you go. Libertalia. Highly recommend you check it out. Stonemaier Games sent me a copy, but doesn't mean anything. If I didn't like it, you know, like I said, there's a reason. I don't have any other games in my collection anymore. I've owned a few of them, but none have stuck around until this one. So that should tell you something as well. Thanks for watching. Hit the thumb button. Let YouTube know that you like this. If you want to smash it and tell all your friends as well. As always, stay classy. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. And if you like this, there's more where that came from. Subscribe to the channel and let me know. I even have a Patreon. That's it. And ramble over. See you around.